Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January Humanist MN Community Gathering. I'm Ellie Hayland. I'm president of the organization. We're so happy to have you all here. For any new visitors or members here today, I wanted to give you a little crash course on humanism. I'm sure most of you have a handle on it to some degree, but I just like to do this at the beginning. Humanist MN is a secular community for ethical living. We are committed to the well-being of all and the sustainability of the planet. We are a home for those looking for a community of naturally curious, compassionate, and rational people. And in short, we believe you can be good without a God. We're a very active organization. We organize primarily through Meetup, so join us there to see our wide variety of upcoming events. And we're an all-volunteer nonprofit, so we depend on the service and generosity of our members and friends to further our mission. We have many volunteer opportunities such as marketing, media and tech, membership, programming, and social action. Myself and Audrey Kingstrom, who's our program coordinator, will be downstairs during the reception after this with sign-up opportunities, so you can feel free to approach us and ask any questions that you have then. You can also go to our website at humanistmn.org to learn more about us or explore other opportunities to get involved. And there you can also support us by becoming a dues-paying member. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Restrooms are out the door and to the left, or if you go downstairs and to the left, there are some there as well. After the speaker and Q&A session, we will have our social hour and a book signing downstairs at 4:30. Please stay and socialize. We'll be providing food and drinks specially catered by Certix today. And we encourage you to please consider contributing with a donation to help us cover our costs. And one last note, there will be photography and video taken today that may be used at a later date for promotion and marketing purposes. Up next, Audrey Kingstrom, board member and program coordinator.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you here today. If you are on our Meetup site, you know that we have lots of programming. We are a very active community. And I would encourage you to, if you don't have Meetup, your settings to ping you every time we announce something, you should look at it regularly because we have oftentimes multiple things going on even in 1 week. So do keep abreast of things through our Meetup page. I'd like to point out just a few highlights. We have lots of community service opportunities that are ongoing, some long-standing for years and years, and some that just sort of pop up and we do on a kind of a more immediate basis. So do check all of those out because we want to do good together in the world, and it's all of us sort of stepping up to help out with that. Today is one of our advocacy areas is separation of religion and government. We work with an organization called Compassion and Choices, trying to give increased end-of-life options. And there is a we have been trying for years to get a bill passed that allows for medical aid in dying, as many states have already done. We're trying to get that passed here in Minnesota. Well, the legislature doesn't convene until February, but one of the committees is holding an informational meeting for legislators this next Thursday, January 25th at 1 o'clock in the afternoon over by the Capitol at the State Office Building. You will see that listed on our Meetup page. There's also information downstairs about it. And I want to just urge all of you, if you care about separation of religion and government, you need to consider writing to your legislator or showing up at this hearing. We as secular people have to show up because a lot of the opposition for this particular bill is people from the religious right, and they will show up. So it's really important to have a more activist approach to this. And we can't sit on the sidelines if we really want to have legislation that represents our views and a secular view for society. Also next month, right here in this space, our community gathering, our topic for next month is schools and the culture wars. Again, something that touches on the issue that we are addressing here today. And so that's Saturday, February 17th, so I hope you'll mark your calendars, 3 p.m. right here. We're going to have a panel of a teacher, school board member, and a representative from Education Minnesota to speak about what's going on in our schools right now. Finally, save the date for May 1st. It's a Wednesday when we have our National Day of Reason breakfast and reception at the state capitol. We've done this for quite a few years. We have built relationships with our legislators, and we helped initiate the Secular Government Caucus here in Minnesota. And we invite the legislators, we invite other nonprofits who support separation of religion and government to stand, and we're trying to, again, have this presence and let our legislators know that we stand for reason and secular values and good humanistic values, inclusive values, and that's how we want them to govern. So there'll be, again, information downstairs about that. So after our program today, and we're really looking forward to what we're going to hear today, but I hope you will be energized and go downstairs, not just for the refreshments, though they're going to be especially good today, but that we have a bunch of information tables up. And not just me and Ellie, but others of our leadership team are going to be downstairs. They have clipboards, they have sign-up sheets. Find a way for you to get involved and not sit back on the sidelines. But you can find your own way. You don't have to be the kind of activist who's out front, whether it's working behind the scenes, just connecting with other people and helping build a movement, or getting out there. There's a place for you. As many of us like to say, don't agonize, organize. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Suzanne, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Hello, everyone. Do it this way. Hello, everyone. My name is Suzanne Perry. I'm on the board of Humanist MN and on the program committee. And I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker today, who's in from San Francisco, Bradley Onishi. Brad is co-host of the podcast Straight White American Jesus, which I think should win some kind of award for most creative name of a podcast. He's also author of a new book, Preparing for War, The Extremist History of White Christian Nationalism and What Comes Next, which, as Ellie mentioned, will be for sale downstairs, and you can get Brad to sign it. Brad's presentation couldn't be more timely, as we are fresh off of the Iowa caucuses, where white evangelicals helped propel Donald Trump to victory. A religion scholar who teaches at the University of San Francisco, Brad offers a perspective that most other experts on Christian nationalism cannot. He is a former evangelical minister. The title of the first chapter of his book is, Would I Have Been There? By there, he means the January 6th insurrection. He brings that perspective to his podcast as well, where with his co-host, Dan Miller, he decodes some of the religious beliefs that undergird white Christian nationalism 3 times a week. Please give a warm welcome to Brad Onishi.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I want to say thank you to Audrey and to Suzanne, to Scott, to Bob, to all the other board members and others who helped make today happen, and really excited to be here. I have a 4-month-old baby, and so I haven't been doing much speaking or traveling. The last time I did travel was to Fort Worth in August, It was 106 degrees. And I believe it's about 6 degrees today, maybe more. So if you invite me, it should either be triple digits or single digits, okay? I'm not going if it's 75 and lovely, okay? As Suzanne said, this is something I've lived. I left evangelicalism in 2005 and stayed kind of in the religion game as a scholar. So I've been studying these things for the last 2 decades, and I kind of bring an insider scholarly perspective to the whole phenomenon. As she said, we talk about this 3 times a week on our show, so it's always fresh on my mind, and it's kind of what I eat and breathe and live on a daily basis. So some of these slides I just added in the last couple days because things keep getting scarier. So let's jump in. All right. Hopefully our audio is going to play. We'll see if this plays for us.
The other day, Donald Trump said on his first day he's going to be a dictator for a day.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
You'd rather have Donald Trump as a dictator for 4 years or re-elect Joe Biden for 4 years?
I would rather have Donald Trump. I'd like to see them repeal the Roosevelt law so that he can be a president for a lot more than 4 years. But this country needs a dictator. I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
So this country needs a dictator, okay? I want you to hold on to that, right? We just started class. What are you going to remember first thing? This country needs a dictator, okay?
1933.
Yep.
Burning the right stuff.
We've got some echoes of earlier times. So here's the thesis for today. And I'm going to back this thesis up here. We've reached a point not only where democracy is not a sacred value to many Americans, but at which they are ready to express that fact proudly in public. There's an authoritarian threat to American democracy that looms. As Suzanne said, the Iowa caucuses just happened, just down to the south here. Christian nationalism is a driving force of this threat, and the 2024 elections will decide the direction of this country for generations. That's kind of how I view what is ahead for us in the year upcoming, and I want to talk about that today. So I think there's one reaction to this gentleman who just said we need a dictator, to say, hey, it's one guy, he's at a Trump rally. Should we even pay attention to that? I mean, come on. He's one guy. Maybe he's somebody who goes from Trump rally to Trump rally. That's his hobby. He's a super fan. Is this really indicative of anything? I mean, right? I mean, that's what a naysayer could say. So my argument today will be that, in fact, what happened with that gentleman is he is downstream from an intellectual, a theological, a pastoral, an ideological set of sources that have put into the rivers, so to speak, the idea that democracy is not a sacred value, and that if democracy gets in our way, that we should probably get rid of it, okay? My argument also is that Christian nationalism plays a key role in that whole approach, that Christian nationalism is one of the driving forces and could be the biggest threat to American democracy in our contemporary landscape. So to be brief about Christian nationalism, I think it has 3 foundational components: the myth of the Christian nation, nostalgia for past glory, and an apocalyptic view of the nation's future. The myth of the Christian nation is the easiest way to think about Christian nationalism. People argue about this in my world with scholars. There's endless debates and definitions, and everyone's never happy with what it means. Here, I think, is a very easy way to think about Christian nationalism. If you think that Christians should be privileged in the United States in any way, you are a Christian nationalist. So if we get together and you say, I'm a Christian, and therefore I should have priority in any way, you're a Christian nationalist. You may not be part of a militia. You may not be talking about dictators. But if you think that only Christians should be president of the United States, if you think that we should have in God we trust on the money, because we just should, I think you're a Christian nationalist, okay? Because what you're saying is this is a Christian nation. And you're saying that as a Christian nation, that Christian people should have priority somehow. Could be culturally, could be economically, could be politically. But that's the easiest definition of Christian nationalists. Now, where does the Christian nationalists get the idea that they should be prioritized? Well, they'll tell you that this is a Christian nation. This is a Christian nation that was built for and by Christians. And they'll proof text Thomas Jefferson or James Madison or anyone else to kind of tell you that, right? That despite the complex and very nuanced approaches to religion and non-religion by those American founders, Christian nation, that's all I want to hear. Don't talk to me about anything else. As a result, if you are a Christian person, they say we are central to the narrative of the United States because this is a nation elected by God to play an exceptional role in human history. That this nation is truly exceptional. This is American exceptionalism with a deep religious tint. The Christian elements, belief in God's rule and election, are fused with a white nationalist ideology, that the United States is superior to all other nations and that we should take an America-first approach to policy and trade. Now, don't get me wrong, and I'm happy to talk about this downstairs afterwards, during the Q&A, whenever you'd like. There are Christian nationalists who are not white, for sure. But here's what all the data shows us, okay? That when you talk to Christian nationalists, on the whole, who are not white, people of color, black people, others, their understanding of the United States is that it is a Christian nation. Now, a lot of you in the room right now are humanists, and you're thinking, well, that's not good. I agree, okay? But they're going to say it's a Christian nation, and you know what? We've never really lived up to that. So we hope for a more perfect union. That we've never lived up to the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but maybe we'll get there. It's an optimistic view of the United States. Now, do I hold that view of this is a Christian nation? I don't. But if you look at the data on the whole, that is what a black church in Atlanta or other folks of color, an Asian American church might tell you about the United States, okay? When it comes to the data, when it comes to white Christian nationalists, people who are white and Christian nationalists, they're going to tell you a different story on the whole. They're going to tell you that this Christian nation has gone awry, that we have gone astray. It used to be good. It is no longer. So it is a nostalgic myth, a myth for a lost American greatness, and a hope that we might avoid apocalypse by returning to the Christian foundations of the country. Now, to be a Christian nationalist, and this might surprise some of you, you don't actually have to go to church or read the Bible. I know. Kind of weird. One of the things about being a Christian nationalist is it's a cultural identity. It's an identity that you can adopt to tell a story about yourself and your country. You can say to yourself, Christian nation, we used to be great. We are no longer. If we got back to biblical values, like building a border wall, eradicating reproductive rights, a Muslim ban, this would be a Christian nation again. And you can say that if we don't do that, God's going to punish us. And you can say, hey, Bill, thanks for sharing that at Thanksgiving. Really appreciated your thoughts there. Pass the stuffing. And what, did you learn that at church? And Bill might say, I haven't been to church in 5 years. Great. Did you read that in the Bible, Bill? And he might say, I don't read the Bible. I don't know. Because to think about this is simply a matter of believing in a certain set of doctrines, I think, is a mistake. It's a cultural identity. We all have cultural identities. Midwesterners, right? Californians, okay? Southerners, we all have various cultural identities that we tell about ourselves. We have stories that we tell about ourselves, okay? For me, is my family's from Hawaii. We don't even wear shoes. In my family, if you were putting on socks when I was young, something bad happened. Somebody was in jail, maybe. Maybe somebody died. That's the only reason to wear socks, okay? So for me to be here in 6-degree weather, I have no idea what I'm doing, okay? I am freezing. I was eating breakfast this morning at the hotel. Someone was in shorts, and I had my coat on and almost went to get the duvet to cover myself up. We all tell stories about ourselves, right? So you can tell a story about a Christian nation and you as a Christian person, and it doesn't mean you go to Bible study 3 times a week, all right? Now, let's talk about nostalgia. Perry and Whitehead argue in their book that Christian nationalists view the United States as similar to Israel in the Hebrew Bible. If the nation disobeys God, then we will be punished. Some of you might be familiar with a very infamous clip from Jerry Falwell Sr. right after 9/11. Anybody seen this on YouTube? If you're in a bad mood later and you want to get into a worse mood, Google it, okay? After 9/11, Jerry Falwell says, why did 9/11 happen? Gay people, humanists, look out. Women who want reproductive rights, lesbians, gays, so on, so on, so on. We were punished for disobeying God. That's the idea, right? If you're a Christian nationalist and largely a white Christian nationalist. So when was America great? This is always a good question. When were we on track? When were we following God? 2016, 70% of white evangelicals told Public Religion Research Institute that they believe the country has changed for the worse since the 1950s. So a lot of folks, when they say the country lost its way, are going to tell you that the 1950s were the time when things were great. Okay?
For white people.
Good, right. A for the day. Where are you? Okay. 1950s, a time before Jim Crow was abolished, a time before the Civil Rights Act was passed, a time before the Voting Rights Act was passed, a time before immigration reform, a time before the Loving case was decided by the Supreme Court, where me, a mixed-race person, his parents could have gotten married legally, right? A lot of states before 1967, interracial marriage, still not legal. A time before Stonewall, a time before the feminine mystique, a time before we could talk for hours about what happened in the 60s. Now, is that work done? Were the 1960s perfect? Not at all. But things happened that changed the landscape of this country. And for many of us, we would say progress was made. Not finished. By no means was it even close to complete. But there are things we could point to that changed the lives of a lot of people. A lot of Asian Americans like me will say, my family is here because of the immigration reform that happened in the 1960s. The folks I'm talking about will tell you that's exactly when things went bad. We have to remember that it's not just the Judeo-Christian tradition where the country was founded, but in the social and the moral revolution of the 1960s and 70s, says Timothy Goglin. He works at Focus on the Family. He said this in 2020. In his view, the 1960s were, quote, a frontal assault directly on the Beatitudes, the Ten Commandments, the whole body of ethics that forms the Judeo-Christian foundations of the United States of America. This week, there was a... we're going to get there. Well, we'll get there in 1 second. Well, let's go there now. This week, this all came really to the forefront with Charlie Kirk, the head of TPUSA. Are we familiar with Charlie Kirk? If you're not, you should be. He's probably one of the top 10 most influential people in the American right today, and I'm not exaggerating. He is immensely influential. He has bridged the gap between being a kind of new Rush Limbaugh and a very popular kind of Christian nationalist youth pastor. He appeals to folks who are in their 20s and 30s. He just started a new initiative to work with a prominent pastor to do a tour to get Trump reelected, and so on. He said, the deification of Martin Luther King Jr. and his proto-DEI ideology marks the exact moment that the progress of Black America goes sideways. Their cities disintegrate, their families collapse, educational progress stagnates, they become enormously dependent on government support, crime explodes, and 25% of Black men are incarcerated by age 25. You will know the tree by its fruit. He talked about how the Civil Rights Act was a mistake because it was a refounding of America, and he said that Martin Luther King Jr. is a bad guy. So let's just take a minute, right? I don't know about you, but what I'm used to on Martin Luther King Jr. Day over the last, say, decade are conservative politicians tweeting out some colorblind, I don't see color kind of thing, but Martin Luther King Jr. was great, and here's why his quote on this actually supports my attempt to eradicate reproductive rights, right? I'm used to the sort of game of he's great, and he was actually for the things I'm for, which is going to take some gymnastics mentally, but nonetheless, I'm Ted Cruz, and I don't care. I'll do that anyway. We've reached a point in this country where someone like Charlie Kirk will say openly on a podcast, on a tweet, in public, Martin Luther King Jr. was a bad guy. That's where we are. Now, I think the whole colorblind Ted Cruz approach, awful, detrimental, hurtful, disgusting. Somehow gets worse, I think. I mean, at least we know, at least he's telling us where he is, right? The final defining trait of Christian nationalism I want to talk about is an apocalyptic tone. The idea about the past is that we were once great and are no longer. The idea about the future is this: if we don't fix things, this country will disintegrate. It will not be here. The evangelical emphasis on the end of the world is transposed into a crisis narrative. If real Americans don't take decisive action, they will not simply lose their majority in the Houses of Congress or see a political opponent in the White House. The country as they know it will be gone forever. There's a difference between a political opponent who doesn't agree with you and you hope loses the election, but if they win, you'll work to do everything you can to persuade them to do things differently, and a political enemy. This crisis narrative says, if this happens, the country will no longer be here. So before 2020, for example, a lot of prominent pastors and pundits would say, if Joe Biden, the Marxist, is elected, you will no longer have an America that you recognize. There's two things to say about that. One, I don't usually trace the history of Marxism from Marx to Trotsky to Lenin to Joe Biden. I mean, we can debate it over coffee if you all want to talk about it later, but that doesn't usually how that, pantheon of Marxist figures goes for me. Joe Biden, pretty moderate. Joe Biden, been in the Senate since 1927 or so. Not really known as a radical, okay? So that's one, but two is this. Here's the really important part. If you are in a crisis, if you're in a time where there's an emergency, you can justify extreme action. Okay? I live in California. We have earthquakes there. I have a 2.5-year-old and a 4-month-old. Okay? It's Saturday. Usually on Saturdays, my wife and I are trying to take those two kids to the park. Takes about 58 minutes to get ready. Diapers, milk, change of clothes, extra change of clothes, car seats, all that stuff. Snacks. Somebody threw up. Okay, let's get that. Dad isn't wearing a shirt. Okay, Dad, go get a shirt on. I mean, come on. If there's an earthquake, what happens? Do I think about what I normally do? Do I think ahead? Do I care about norms and processes? Do I think, hey, if I do this as a parent the right way, it'll be better for everybody? When you have an emergency, you don't think that. You think safety. You think get to a place that is one where I won't lose my life. If there's an earthquake, I just grab the baby and run, or I just grab the baby and get under the table. So if you are told constantly by your pastor, by the radio, by the YouTube folks you follow, by the podcasts you listen to, that this country will no longer exist if the Marxist Joe Biden is elected, then you're going to be broken down moment by moment, day by day to think, yeah, we better do something. And democracy takes a long time. It's slow. There's like judges and appeals, and there's legislatures, there's state legislature, there's county supervisors. It's an earthquake. It's a fire. We need to go now. We don't have time to think ahead. I don't have time to respect my political opponent. I don't have time for norms. I don't have time for normal. I need to do what you do in a crisis. And you can tell me, I can't believe you would do that. I can't believe you would act this way. And you know what I'm going to tell you? It's not my fault if you see the fire burning all around you. I'm going to act in a way that makes sense, that is rational if there is an apocalypse coming or an apocalypse happening. So the apocalyptic narrative, it does something. You might hear some of these folks talk and think, I can't believe that. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. That's irrational. That is not founded on evidence. I largely agree with you. But don't lose sight of what it does. If you convince millions and 10 millions of Americans they're in an apocalypse, then when you say, hey, let's do this radical thing that oversteps norms, processes, and democratic institutions, they're like, yeah, we probably need to, because we're in an apocalypse. Restoring America for these folks, going back to the 1950s, going back to a time, to a state where we are in good favor with God, going back to the American founding, however you want to phrase it, doesn't mean restoring democracy. I wrote a piece recently with a colleague about Mike Johnson, and one of the quotes that I had in that piece was that if you come from the worldview that Mike Johnson has, when you wake up in the morning, your thought is not, hey, how can I work across the aisle to make America better? The thought is, how can I colonize Earth for God? If you want to colonize Earth for God, democracy's not, it's like kind of down the rung of priorities, isn't it? 3, 4, 5, 6 priorities down. If we want to restore America, it might just mean the opposite of democracy. It might just mean that democracy is not a sacred value. It might mean that democracy is not the goal. The goal is power. The goal is to colonize the earth for God. So if democracy becomes a problem rather than a solution, well then at some point you might need to put democracy aside. Let's go back to our friend at the Trump rally.
The other day, Donald Trump said on his first day he's going to be a dictator for a day.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
You'd rather have Donald Trump as a dictator for 4 years or re-elect Joe Biden for 4 years?
I would rather have Donald Trump. I'd like to see the repealed Roosevelt law so that he can be a president for a lot more than 4 years. But this country needs a dictator. I hate to say that, but it's the truth.
This country needs a dictator. Now, where did this come from? If the idea that I'm presenting to you is that for a lot of folks, including many white Christian nationalists, democracy is not the sacred value, and if this gentleman is saying we need a dictator, where did that come from? It's arrived downstream in this man-on-the-street interview, but it's been cultivated and spread by intellectuals, theologians, historians, pastors, pundits, many of whom are Christian nationalists and for whom democracy is a problem, not a solution.
True. The other day, Donald Trump said on his first day he's going to be a dictator.
Don't need to hear that again. So here's Kevin Slack. Kevin Slack is a political scientist at Hillsdale College from his book, War on the American Republic. At some point in the decline of every empire, it finally dawns on a truly great leader, one born of the family of the lion or the tribe of the eagle. Anyone from that tribe here today? Okay. Hey, I could run this thing. The new right now often discusses a red Caesar, by which it means a leader whose post-constitutional rule will restore the strength of his people. Post-constitutional rule. So we've gotten to a place where gentleman in the previous slide says we need a dictator. Charlie Kirk says MLK bad guy. Political scientist at Hillsdale College says we might just be in store for post-constitutional rule. Here's Michael Anton from the Claremont Institute. Who knows about the Claremont Institute? There's somebody named John Eastman, also from the Claremont Institute. He happens to be a lawyer. Happened to, I don't know, inspire Donald Trump's efforts on January 6th. He's in a lot of legal trouble at the moment. Same outfit, okay? Same group. We may define Caesarism, therefore, as authoritarian one-man rule, partially legitimized by necessity. Legitimized by necessity. If you're in an apocalypse, you act accordingly. That necessity is the breakdown of Republican constitutional rule, or if you want to put it bluntly, the corruption of the people. A nation no longer capable of ruling itself must yet be ruled. Only dogmatic libertarians look forward to anarchy, and none have yet found a way to make it work. The benefits of Caesarism to Caesar are obvious, to a nation perhaps less so, but some who see certain features of Caesarism as advantageous might therefore conclude, however wrongly or mistakenly, that their best option is to work towards such a problematic regime. Now, he goes on in the book, he seems kind of hesitant here, he goes on in the book to say, it might be one of our better options, Red Caesar, okay? Here's Patrick Deneen, a philosopher at Notre Dame. Today's widespread yearning for a strong leader, one with the will to take back popular control over liberalism's forms of bureaucratized government and globalized economy, comes after decades of liberal dismantling of cultural norms and political habits essential to self-governance. So Deneen is sort of hinting at this as well, saying the yearning for a strong leader. That's the common thread here. If we just had one strong leader to fix it all, that would be better than voting and the voice of the people and shared power. That's the thread. Here's Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson's in Moscow, Idaho. Once you get done watching Jerry Falwell tonight, Google Doug Wilson. You'll be in a very bad mood. So Doug Wilson is somebody who has, among other things, talked about slavery as a good thing, talked about the American South before the Civil War as a place where race relations were never better in U.S. history. And you might think, fringe guy, why are you telling me about a guy over in Idaho who is nobody? Well, he's a pastor. He's also started several publishing houses, has a number of podcasts, has a couple of best-selling books, and if by all accounts, if you said how many Americans listen to Doug Wilson on a monthly basis, the number would be in the millions, and I'm not exaggerating that, okay? Wilson has repeatedly disavowed any interest in national electoral politics, but Christchurch's eventual aim is what Wilson explicitly describes in a 2016 book as theocracy, or a network of nations bound together by a formal acknowledgement of the lordship of Jesus Christ, as opposed to secular society ruled by civil governments, which are in necessary degree satanic, demonic, and influenced by the god of this world, who is the devil. These beliefs have led Christchurch into conflicts with local government, but additionally, Wilson and other Christchurch members have founded a range of local and national institutions which are affiliated with or sponsored by the church. So Wilson is much more, we see in this treatment, explicit about the Christian dimensions of this. Why do we need a strong leader? Well, because the God of this world is the devil. You see the difference? If my political person across the aisle is my opponent, that's one thing, right? I might see them at the grocery store if it's a local election. I might buy insurance from them. I don't know. But they might be running for mayor, and I might not think that they're a very good candidate for these reasons. That's a political opponent. And if Janice wins the mayoral election, guess what? I'm going to do everything I can to change Janice's mind about this, this, and this. If you are a devil, if you are a demon, if, as Alex Jones says, you smell like sulfur, if you have lizard DNA, how can we work together in a civil society? How can we have a democracy? It's not about changing your mind. Everybody has a voice and we're going to negotiate. It's about I win, you lose. If I don't get power, the devil wins. That apocalypse is very present in that kind of thinking. All right, here's Stephen Wolfe. Stephen Wolfe's book is published by Doug Wilson's Press. When this book came out on Amazon, I'm an author, you know. Unfortunately, when you're an author, you kind of wonder, hey, is anyone buying my book, you know? And you check Amazon sometimes, and you see the rankings, you know, and you feel good or bad or whatever. It's not a great way to live. It's something you shouldn't do, okay? I checked on the numbers for Stephen Wolfe when this book came out last year. When in the first couple of months it came out, it was in the top, you ready for it? Who wants to guess? It was in the top what on Amazon? Close. It was in the top 100 on Amazon. And you think, well, top 100, that's out of like 15 million books. If you're in the top 100 on Amazon, do you know how many books you're selling a day? So this is not a guy in a basement at a church with 8 people, okay, in Appalachia or right somewhere in rural North Dakota or you know far east Oregon. This is somebody, okay, whose book was in the top 100 on Amazon when it came out. What Stephen Wolfe wants, if you read his book, is a Christian prince rather than what we have now. This divine presence in the prince speaks to his role beyond civil administration. Through him, as the mediator of divine rule, the prince brings God near to the people. The prince is a sort of national God. Not in the sense of being divine or in materially transcending common humanity or as an object of prayer or spiritual worship. So don't worry. You don't pray to this God. He's not supernatural, but he is the mediator of divine rule for the nation, and is one with divinely granted power to direct them in their national completeness. He embodies the people as one who, by divine power, executes their will for themselves. Does not sound like anything close to democracy, does it? Okay, Stephen Wolfe, it gets worse. That's the title of this slide. Here we go.
The term Christian nationalism has been thrown around a lot lately, most of the time as a way to dismiss or mock anyone who wants to engage in politics as a Christian. But those of us who look to the broad Christian tradition should seize the term for ourselves. We are indeed Christian nationalists. The nation is not a mere collection of people, but a people united around a set of shared loves. Some of these loves are universal in all nations, such as the love of family and home. Other loves are more particular to each nation, such as shared culture, language, and national struggles and achievements. Together, these loves form a nation's way of life, generating a love for the place in which you and your ancestors conducted that way of life. Johann Herder once said that everyone loves his country, his manners, his language, his wife, his children, not because they are the best in the world, but because they are absolutely his own, and he loves himself and his own labors in them. Now, when we hear the term nationalism, many of us think of fascism or militarism, and there's a history of that in the world for sure. But it's better to think of the ism of nationalism as referring to the nation acting as a people for their national good. A Christian nation is a nation that is self-consciously Christian, and on that account seeks the nation's complete good, earthly and heavenly goods, for themselves and for their posterity. Now, the two ways that a people order themselves is through civil law and social customs. Civil laws, when just, are ordinances of God binding our conscience. Why? Because just laws are rooted in God's moral law. God's law is tailored for our good and happiness. Our highest happiness is found in eternal life. And so civil law ought to order us to the things of eternal life, word and sacrament. Civil law cannot compel belief in the gospel, nor that one worships God in heart, but it can create the best outward conditions for one to conduct undisturbed and focused worship of God. Thus, in addition to ensuring justice in our civil relations, civil authority can regulate the Sabbath day, for example, to remove those daily cares and concerns that distract us from Sunday worship. Though often defined by its abuse, cultural Christianity is vital to Christian nationalism. While civil law is an explicit ordering of society, cultural Christianity operates implicitly by establishing in us a positive, prejudicial regard for the gospel. It cannot bring us to faith, but it makes the truths of the faith plausible to us. Cultural Christianity also contributes to a more orderly, high-trust society, since everyone has a mutual expectation of Christian conduct. Thus, we have an explicit ordering of civil law and an implicit ordering by social custom. Together, these compose the sort of thing Christian nationalism is, what I call a totality of national action. This is a fancy way of saying that all things that a Christian nation would expect of us, both in law and custom, and no matter how mundane, are for the good of the whole. I'm Stephen Wolfe. For more on Christian nationalism, check out my book, The Case for Christian Nationalism.
Okay. So in his mind, Stephen Wolfe, nations can only be founded on a shared ethnicity. So if you read his book, this becomes very clear. Because, and I quote, your kin have belonged to this people in this land, to this nation in this place, and so they bind you to that people and place, creating a Volkgeist. Wolfe's argument for nationalism based on the shared ethnicity of a Volk, based in blood relations, comes into focus when he explains his intended reader. I am male, and I'm rooted ancestrally in Western Europe, and I'm speaking largely to a Western European male audience. So if you read the book, he is very open about being a kinist, K-I-N-I-S-T. He argues that while God wants us to love everyone, that we are called to love those who are like us more. And he uses the words Volk and homeland to describe that.
I can't help but feel like he's one step away from this being Hitler.
Volk is German.
It is German. Volk is German, and it's used quite often in Nazi propaganda and by Hitler, right, as both of you have pointed out here. Think about this. He's making an argument based on Christianity that one should love those like them more than anyone else. He's saying that the only way to have a nation is to gather with those like you who share a way of life and whose laws are ordered according to our greatest good, which is found in the God he worships and the idea of eternal life. So the idea to have a multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralist democracy full of religious and non-religious Americans, bound by ideals, an experiment that says we are not those with the same story, the same faith, the same creed, but we are those that will take the experiment of living in a democracy that dares to say that pursuing life, liberty, and happiness is available to all of us if we share power and we all hold to those ideals. Have we ever achieved that? Never. But the idea of a more perfect union is one that we can continue to pursue. But to me, this idea stands in direct contrast to that. It's one that openly, just as we've heard today, dictator, MLK, bad guy, we now have Volk and Homeland coming from somebody whose book was in the top 100 at one point on Amazon this year.
The term.
All of this helps explain something that I'm not going to go into great detail today, but I'm happy to talk about further afterward. There is a deep longing and fascination and admiration for Putin and Orban, the leader of Hungary, Viktor Orban, among the group I'm talking about today. They see them as leaders who embody what they want here. They are the real-life manifestations of the Christian prince or the Red Caesar, the benevolent representative of God, the divine autocrat, the protector of family, of sex, of gender, and of the state, the one who holds all bodies, fleshly and political, in line, in their place, and without fluidity or slippage or confusion. The ones who jettison foreign agents and queer elements, the ones who criminalize difference, the ones who mandate binaries and certainty. So, you may not believe me, so I'm going to prove it to you. This is Lauren Witzke. Lauren was the candidate for Senate from the Republican Party in Delaware in 2020. Not state Senate, the United States Senate. There's only 100 senators we have. That's not very many. If you're part of the Senate, you're part of a pretty small group of Americans. This was the person they sent to run for that office in 2020 from Delaware.
Putin's right to protect his people and always put his people first, but also protect their Christian values. I identify more with with Putin's Christian values than I do with Joe Biden. So, like there is that, there is that there. And, Christian nationalist countries also are a threat to the global regime. Like the Luciferian regime, it wants to mash everything together, but Putin takes care of his people. He looks out for his people. I watched as he deported, like they literally walked them through the streets, the criminal illegals who were coming into their country. They walked them out and they escorted them out and they said, get out. I can respect that. I can respect that, and I can respect the fact that Putin does everything he can to protect his people.
How blind can you be?
White Christian American nationalists see autocratic regimes as the shining cities on a hill. They are the paragons of how to construct a pure society. Using the rhetoric of Christian heritage and family values, leaders like Orban and Putin give transcendent authority to their anti-democratic, anti-LGBTQ, and anti-pluralist modes of governance. So, let me just say a couple more minutes here and I'll conclude, I promise. Some of you are scared enough. I talked to my friend Paul Jupe. So these statistics come from the sociologist of religion, Paul Jupe, who's the founder of Religion in Public, works at Denison University in Ohio. And here's what Paul found when he did a recent survey. 9% of Americans want only Christians to be citizens. So sometimes I tell people that stat, and they're like, well, good news, only 9%. And my response is, so if we get 10 folks in front here, okay, and one of those folks is going to say, only Christians should be a citizen, okay? Now, earlier, Audrey talked about showing up to the State House, right? And she said, because the religious right's going to show up. That is exactly true. I can show you the stats. I can give you all the ways that is true in elections, in electoral politics, whether that is for county supervisor, state legislature, for a bill they want passed at the Minnesota legislature, in the Texas legislature, wherever. And it is definitely true when it comes to the U.S. House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, and the President. So the 1 out of 10 to me, there's a lot of folks who don't vote. Am I right? Get about 50-something% if we're lucky who vote? Okay, so let's just say we got 5 folks now. I know that out of those 5, that one guy, that one gal who thinks that only Christians should be citizens is still there, because I know they vote, right? And I know they vote every election without fail, and I know who they're voting for, okay? Now, 14% of Americans think that their church should have a veto on the government's laws, okay? So it gets even worse, right? So it's not just that these are a few academics from Notre Dame or from the Claremont Institute or from churches you've never heard of. Not only do those people have sway over millions of Americans, but we see it in some of these statistics, okay? All right. Now, Trump just won the Iowa caucuses, and he won in a landslide, right? He got more of the vote than his 3 competitors combined, than Haley, Ramaswamy, and DeSantis combined, okay? If you look at the numbers of the Iowa caucuses, 55% of the voters in Iowa are white evangelicals, okay? And about 80 to 85% of white evangelicals in this country are Christian nationalists. So what that tells me is about half the people who voted in Iowa are white Christian nationalists. Now, Iowa is a different state, right? It's like 87% white. It's different than a lot of states in this country. Nonetheless, that's what happened. So here's a poll from August of 2023. Who do you feel like is telling you the truth when they speak? Okay? If we ask Trump voters, you're a Trump voter, you just voted for Trump in Iowa, you're going to vote for Trump in New Hampshire, I'm going to ask you, who's telling you the truth? 7 out of 10 of those people are like Trump. Trump is telling me the truth. Whatever he says is true. 63% friends and family, who are, good chance they might be Trump voters, who knows? Conservative media figures, religious leaders, etc. Right? Okay? All right. All great cultures of the past perished only because the originally created race died out from blood poisoning. Immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation. Some of you heard Trump say this the other day. He said it a number of times over the last couple days. What does this mean for 2024? I have some takeaways, and I'm telling you right now, we're going to disagree. Some of you are going to be like, I don't agree, and that's completely fine. Happy to talk about it, happy to dialogue and negotiate and really listen to each other. But these are mine. I'm not asking them to be yours, but I'm going to just tell you why they're mine, okay? Before I do that, I'm going to scare you one more time. I apologize. So here's what we've got today. You ready? We started with this country needs a dictator. We saw like 4 or 5 examples of philosophers, pundits, and pastors who have sway over millions of people saying, post-constitutional rule might be good. Caesar sounds kind of good. You know, there's a daddy complex. I just want daddy to come in and save the nation because we're just little kids and we just messed it all up. So we saw that. We saw the ways that Lauren Witzka and others are like, hey, Putin, that's the guy. Let's get him in here, okay? We saw that the candidate who is on his way to winning the Republican nominee for president, a man who's been indicted 91 times, a man who's a convicted sexual abuser, a man who has already been found guilty of fraud, a man who incited an insurrection, okay, is saying words that are from Mein Kampf. Now and you're like, well, who knows? If he's elected, maybe it'll be better. But he's already told us what will happen if he gets elected. Some of you know about Project 2025? Some of you? Okay, you should know about Project 2025. It comes from the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation was founded by Christian nationalists back in the 70s, okay? And here is the plan for Trump's second term. Put the FCC, the FTC, and the Justice Department under executive control. So the executive branch would have control of those agencies. Now, the DOJ is really important there, right? The DOJ was meant to be independent. Does anybody remember when the DOJ was sort of like, it really became clear those needed to be separate? The president's will and the Department of Justice. Anyone remember when that happened?
The Constitution.
Nixon. Kind of an obvious reason why, I think, right? Put federal workers on Schedule F. Now, what does that mean? It means that if you're a federal worker, tens of thousands of federal workers, you can be fired at will, right? So, and you're like, well, what does that mean? What it means is, if I'm the president and you're a State Department worker, you're a federal employee in a certain agency anywhere, EPA, wherever, and you don't do what I want as the Trump administration, you're fired. This is basically saying we could get rid of tens of thousands of the government desk workers who make the government work every day, who are supposed to be nonpartisan. They go away day one, and you can put loyalists at every rung of the government, every agency, every desk, every place, right, that makes the country go. Gut the EPA, dismantle the FBI, break up the Department of Homeland Security, eliminate the Departments of Education and Commerce. So there's no mystery. We know what's going to happen. This is 900 pages, okay? It's a lot to read, but these are some of the highlights, you know? And we already know what's going to happen. Oh, and presidential immunity. Y'all hear about this? So in the case that Jack Smith is bringing against Trump in terms of what happened on January 6th, there's an argument on Trump's behalf by his lawyers that a president has absolute immunity while he's in office. That you can only seek criminal charges against the president at any point for any reason, even after he's left office, if he's impeached by Congress, by the legislative branch, not by the courts that you and I would answer to if we got in trouble with the law. So the judge says, you're saying a president could sell pardons, sell military secrets, order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival. Nothing can be done. The answer is he would have to be and would be speedily impeached and convicted before the criminal prosecution. So Trump could have ordered somebody in 2020, in the run-up to that election, could have ordered, not somebody, SEAL Team 6 to assassinate Joe Biden. And we're all sort of like, what? We all know what happened. We all know who did it. People are protesting in the streets. There's rallies. Great civil unrest. And guess what? The only way he can be accountable now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now, is impeachment. And if the Senate, by a large majority, doesn't say he's guilty, well, he'll never be held accountable. So we want to do this, and we want immunity. The drift into authoritarianism doesn't always set off alarm bells. Citizens are often slow to realize that their democracy is being dismantled, even as it happens before their eyes. So here's my takeaways. We're not going to agree on every point, and that's completely fine. I think this election will shape the USA for a generation or longer. So let's just play it out. Bryn Tannehill did this the other day on X, and I think it was really smart, and I'll reiterate some of what she said. Trump wins, and everything that I just talked about happens. The Trump second term is not flubbing and infrastructure week every week and Scaramucci and all that business. The second Trump term is the Heritage Foundation and those who have already been thinking about this, pushing through the 900-page agenda. They are essentially going to give him a book that says, follow the book, dummy. Okay? He's already talked about using the Insurrection Act. That means using the military on American citizens on domestic soil. He's talked about large-scale camps for those seeking asylum and undocumented folks. And he's talked about being a dictator for a day so he could build a wall and drill for oil. Okay? So if he wins, we kind of know what happens. If he doesn't win, if he loses, we all know the playbook by now. The country was stolen from you. The election was stolen from you. This wasn't fair. I say in my book that January 6th was not the end, that it was the beginning, that for many it was a moment that they can memorialize. It was an Alamo moment. It was a moment they could say, remember that moment? What did Trump and Elise Stefanik call the J6 prisoners, those in jail because of their crimes on that day? What did they call them the other day? Hostages. Right? It's an incredibly adept use of rhetoric. Right? If any of you teach rhetoric, you know this, right? You teach writing out there, composition. One word. If you say hostage, it's a story in one word. So you're telling me the people that did what they did are hostages. That must mean they're not being held for a just reason. Yes. Who's holding them? The government. Must mean the government's unjust. Must mean what they did was just. You see what I'm saying? You use one word, and you just told us a story. So if he loses to Biden or anyone else, we know what will happen. We know what's ahead. If he goes to jail before that, so many question marks, but we know. Great civil unrest, a lot of folks, grievance, resentment, post-constitutional rule, it all just ramps up. Okay? So I'm not voting third party. This is where we're going to, maybe some of you we're going to disagree. I'm totally happy to spend a long time talking about how the current administration has done things and is doing things that are not good, to say the least. I'm not going to vote third party. I'm not going to vote for Cornel West. I'm not going to vote for Marianne Williamson or anyone else because of everything I've talked about today. And again, happy to have the conversation, but to me that kind of vote is a vote on principle from somebody who many of my friends I've talked to about this, has intentions that I understand and I actually believe in and in many ways agree with, but I'm not going to do it this time. It's not going to happen this time. I'm not refusing to lock arms with anyone who is pro-democracy. So what that means for me is, and when I talk to humanist groups, I talk to atheist groups, I'm part of those groups, a lot of the conversation is a deep suspicion of religion, and I'm here for it. I understand it. I understand the suspicion of religion. I understand the antipathy to religion. I am an ex-evangelical minister who has a lot of that myself. Okay? If there are Christians, if there are Jews, if there are Muslims who are pro-democracy, who want a multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralist democracy where we can all share power and pursue the ideal of life, liberty, and happiness, where we can have inclusion and representation, I'm not going to look at those people and say, I'm not going to lock arms with you. I'm not going to look at them and say, you believe in a sky god that's irrational and ridiculous to me, and so, sorry. I'm not going to do that. I think, in fact, and my friend Andrew Seidel and others are really persuasive on this point, that that's our hope for a democracy in this country. It doesn't mean we have to agree on those points, and if those folks do not want those things, if they do not want a multiracial, multi-ethnic, pluralist democracy, then I'm happy to unlock arms with them. I'm happy to have hard conversations with those folks. But I'm not going to just, by dint of rule or standard, say, you're not with me, so we're not going to work together. I'm going to find one way to be involved. So I know many of you, and Audrey talked about it, already are involved. You might be out front, you might be working behind the scenes, you have the things you're doing. We just started 2024, right? 2024 is 2 weeks old. My encouragement would be not to doom scroll, not to go home and do your homework and watch Jerry Falwell clips and figure out who Doug Wilson is and get really depressed and it's cold outside and we might as well just get some Cheetos and whiskey and call it, call it a year. Screw it. We can do that, and I've done it. I've eaten a lot of Cheetos under the covers over the years, okay? It's not going to help anything. The other thing that's not going to help anything is this. Hey, I can't do everything, so I'm going to do nothing. You know what we got? And I got 2 little kids, so I look at them all the time, and I think, God, man, I brought you into this world, and we got a climate crisis. We got rising authoritarianism. We've got economic inequality. We've got so much that you will have to face in your life. And I can read all the articles. I can look at all the books, and I can get really sad, or I can say, I can't do everything. And I've tried. It doesn't go well. But I can do one thing. So some of you don't need another thing, but some of you do. What's one thing you don't do? Is there an organization that you can support? Can you go with the humanists? Amen. Once a month, whenever it may be, the National Day of Reason, to the state legislature to show up. Doesn't mean you have to speak in front of everybody. Doesn't mean you have to be on video. It just means you showed up. Are there phone calls to make? Are there postcards to write? Are there reproductive rights centers to support? Are there, and I know that you may thinking, well, I live here in my country, right? I live in my community. I live in my county in Minnesota. I live in a place that some of that's going okay. It's going all right, so I'm good. Well, where is it not, right? Just down the road, just down south from here, Iowa, right? Wisconsin had we're talking like a couple thousand votes in Wisconsin in 2020 that pushed Biden over, okay? I know that you're in Minnesota and you don't think Wisconsin drivers are very good. Scott told me that the other day. I know that. You're going to have to get over it. Are there people in Wisconsin you can support? Are there candidates? Are there postcards to write? Okay? What is there to do? Don't do everything, but do one thing. Do one thing for 2024. That's your resolution to add. Because as we just talked about, the drift is real. And before you know it, we're in a place where somebody is saying we need a dictator, somebody is saying MLK, bad guy, where somebody's echoing Mein Kampf, and where the most religious people in that country are voting for that man to say, yes, we want you to be our leader. Okay. You all feel pretty inspired? You probably not. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hello. Hi. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you here. That was fantastic. We are going to start the Q&A portion. A few guidelines. We can't always get through everyone's questions. Of course, you can always continue conversations downstairs. But a few ways to help get through as many questions as possible. Try to avoid compound questions. Just stick to one. Comments disguised as questions. Let's try to focus on questions so we can hear Bradley's responses. Nick here, board member, is doubling as an enforcer of the microphone. He's super scary, so please try to follow the rules or else I don't know what's going to happen.
Not much.
Line up over here. Oh yes, line up over here.
Yeah. Don't be scared. Here we go. Here's a brave soul, Polly, with question numero uno.
Is Trump himself or his people deliberately going to Mein Kampf and expecting that people will recognize that that's what's happening?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So Trump has said, he's denied it. He said, I don't read that book or whatever. But there's also been times when Trump says, and we talked about this on my podcast the other day, where he says, when Hitler said it was bad. Meaning, when Hitler said that, it was bad, but I'm saying it and it's good this time. I don't know what's in his head. You learn that, right? When you do reporting on folks, you can't You don't know their intentions. You know what they've done. What I will say is this. The unfortunate fact about the Nazi regime of Germany is they were masters of propaganda. And you know how I talked about hostages, that one word? They knew that one word or a repeated phrase or a set of themes would have great effect. So whether or not it's a, hey, I'm up late at night reading that book and I'm going to go talk about it at my rally in New Hampshire today, or it is simply a realization that if you play on people's fears and vulnerabilities, if you tell them that their homeland is being taken over by people who are drug addicts and rapists, if you tell them that their children are under threat, if you say that they are trying to destroy you and your family, that there are enough people in the country that will be scared and will react in a way that says, okay, I just want to be safe. Even that means a dictator, even if that means fascism, even if that means Project 2025. So I don't know if it's intentional. What I do know is there are plenty of people in his orbit that understand the human vulnerabilities at play and the rhetoric that will be effective in capitalizing on those vulnerabilities.
Just curious your observations. How do Christian voters, based on morals, how do they rationalize voting for somebody like Donald Trump?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, John. So how do they rationalize voting for Donald Trump? Here's how I think it goes, okay? And just forgive me for a semi-long answer here because it's a really important question. If you think about the narrative we talked about earlier, a sense of American greatness that is now lost and an apocalyptic future, the idea is this. If we don't act quickly, the country will no longer be here. The reason that the country is such under threat is we've disobeyed God. And when we disobey God, God punishes us, and he punishes any nation that doesn't obey him. So if we don't right the ship, we won't be here anymore. That's the idea. So when Trump comes along, and all of you, or many of you at least, sitting here are like, does not seem to be in line with you folks and what you've talked about. Family values, not getting divorced, foul language, whatever. Here's what I would keep in mind. They have reached a point where they not only want the country to look like they want it to look, but they want the people who have changed it in their mind or refounded it or reconstituted it to suffer so that they never do it again. So let's take George W. Bush. Okay? George W. Bush was always talking about God and Jesus. He saved him from alcohol abuse and all that stuff. He changed my heart. The Bible's the greatest book, blah, blah, blah. George Bush did a lot of things that the Christian nationalists I talked about today were really happy about. But you know what? George Bush was president for 8 years. And when he got done, there was still gay people everywhere. On TV, the country was getting more multiracial, less white, less Christian. I mean, it didn't scratch the itch. He might have tried to right the ship, but he didn't punish the people who made it bad. He didn't brutalize the enemies so that they would not even think about doing it again. And then what happened? Barack Hussein Obama. He's made in a lab. It's you're playing a video game and it's hey, create a character who will scare the shit out of a white Christian nationalist. And it's well, this dude's named Barack, he's named Hussein, his dad is from another country, his dad is black, his wife is black, his kids are black. He grew up in Hawaii, which is part of this country, but a lot of people are is it? Do I need to change my money when I go there? Is it really? So he's president, and all of a sudden gay people can get married. This place has lost it. Who do we need? We don't need George W. Bush. We certainly don't need his dad, and we certainly don't need Ronald Reagan. We need a bully. We need a brutalizer. There's a woman the other day who said, I support Trump because he's our David and our Goliath. So he's David, the leader, the king, the figure of the Messiah. A lot of Christians think David was a prefiguration of Jesus, right? But he's also Goliath. Goliath in that story is a bully. He's a big, mean bully who just tries to hurt people. I went to Sunday school a lot of years. No one ever taught me that no one sat down on a Sunday when we were 16 and was how I want you all to try to be like this year or this week or when you're at school? Goliath. But we're now at a place in this country where we need a dictator. MLK is a bad guy. Mein Kampf being recited by the leading candidate in one of the two parties, and Goliath is the Christian figure that we might want to emulate or elect. So how do they rationalize it? They rationalize it by thinking Jesus wants this country to look a certain way, to have a certain kind of social order. That's what Stephen Wolfe talks about in that terrible video. He wants the family to look a certain way. He wants people to act a certain way. And if they don't, we're just at a point where we can't be nice anymore. We can't just give them a pamphlet. We can't elect George W. Bush and his testimony about a changed heart is going to... No. We need a dude who will get in here and make people hurt. And if he will make them hurt, they won't do it again. And if they don't do it again, we'll be right with God. And if we're right with God, God will make it all good. That's the rationalization.
Still reeling from that answer. So it seems like the people in these... It seems like the people in these communities are really emotionally invested and passionate year after year. And I'm wondering, as someone who has left an evangelical community, what do you think is keeping them there in those echo chambers?
Yeah, great question. So I think that when you... so I converted. I didn't grow up in this religion. I converted at age 14. And so when I converted at age 14, two things happened automatically. I got answers to all of my existential questions. And those answers required no long division. Okay, so I was a pretty angsty kid, in ways that would foreshadow being a professor and just, overthinking everything. I would lay in the driveway at night and look up at the stars and think, what's the meaning of life? What's going to happen after we die? Why are we here? Okay? So I get to church, and they're like, you're here because God made you, and God loves you. And if you ask for forgiveness, he'll give you eternal life. And it's like, I didn't even have to work out the equation. It just got solved. So all of the anxiety and vulnerability goes away. Second, I have a community. There's a lot of lonely people in this world, right? I've been a lonely person at times in my life, very much so. So when you have a community that says, come here, Bible study, summer camp, breakfast group, it feels really good. And in addition to that, guess what, John? Guess what, Janice? Guess what, Bill? You get to play a role in a cosmic story. And we just happen to be in the grand finale of that story. This isn't episode 2. This is not the second chapter or the middle iteration of Lord of the Rings. This is not the beginning. This is the grand finale. And you get to play a role in that. Are you ready? You might be somebody who doesn't feel like their job or their life is as big as you want, or you don't feel as important as someone else that you know. But you can play a role in a cosmic story. You ready for that? Does that sound pretty good? Come on in. So when I say what I've been at J6, the reason I ask that is because I was playing a role in a story that felt like it had cosmic significance. And it felt like it started way before me, and it was coming right to the end. And I was part of something that was way bigger than me. That's really appealing. It's really, really appealing to a lot of folks. And it speaks to why, politically, they're so consistent. Because for some of us, it's like, hey, right? Roe fell. I'm going to work until we get that back. I'm going to work until Oberfell happens. Oberfell happened? Good. Mission accomplished. Let's get brunch and play pickleball, shall we? We're done. The folks in these communities never think that. They think, this started way before me. It might happen after me. Regardless of what happens, there's divine good versus evil significance to everything we do. We better vote. We better get the right person in there for school board. We better get the right person for mayor. We better get the right president. Because if we don't, apocalypse. So there's a reason folks are invited. There's a reason people are enchanted. There's a reason they stay. And there's a reason the political motivation remains so consistent.
Hi, Brad. I'd like to brag that I was one of your very first Patreons in Straight Right American Jesus. 2018 I joined.
You joined in 2018?
Yes, I did.
Oh, my God.
One of your very first ones, and I went to one of your very first with Ken Kemp.
Yes.
I was on the call, the Zoom call.
It's great to meet you. Thank you for coming. Thank
So
you for
you're
being
like a
here.
rock star for me.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you coming to our great state of Minnesota. All the examples that you had up there were all men. And I know that that's the majority of this Christian national movement is powered by patriarchy and males.
Yep.
However, there are a lot of women out there too that are doing the exact same thing. Namely, we can say right away, Moms for Liberty. How do we address that? As a mother myself of children and community, and I just it's always about the men that are doing this, but there's so many women out there doing it too. How can we address that?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for calling me out. That was because you're exactly right. All those examples are men, and that's a problem. So thank you for calling me out on that. Say it again.
Except the Delaware Senator.
Yes, except for Lauren Witzka. Yeah, that's right. So I think you're absolutely right. There are a lot of women who are part of this movement, and that seems to a lot of folks to be self-contradictory. How can you be somebody in support of patriarchy if patriarchy is meant to harm you? Unfortunately, we can go back to Phyllis Schlafly. We can go back to any number of figures who have argued that patriarchy is actually the best thing for women and those who are not cis men. How can we address it? There's a number of things I think to think about. You mentioned Moms for Liberty, so I just want to address Moms for Liberty real quick. I think what Moms for Liberty does is something, again, if I go back to rhetoric, is really effective. Is Moms for Liberty shows up in the public square, at the PTA meeting, at the school board meeting, wherever, and says, I'm just a concerned mom, right? And the one word, mom. Now we know, because it's really hard to argue with a mom who's protecting her children. I'm a mama bear. You hear that all the time from that group, okay? I'm just a mom. So they're telling you a couple things. I'm just a mom. I'm not so-and-so. I'm not this big fancy, I'm just a mom. Are you really going to tell a mom not to protect her kids? You really going to tell a mom that she doesn't know what's best for her children? You going to dare to do that? That's a tough place to get in an interview. It's a tough place to get if you got 45 seconds to counter that group. And so I think that, right, one of the best ways to counter that kind of rhetoric is to say, I totally respect all of your concerns about your kids. You don't want your kids to read certain books. You don't want your kids to be exposed to certain things. I want my kids to be exposed to certain things, and I want my kids to have certain experiences. I'm also a concerned parent. I'm also a concerned citizen. I'm a person who has the same status and authority as you. You don't get the moral high ground because you're the more concerned parent or the more anxious parent. So when you say we should take these things away out of the school curriculum or the library for my children, you're saying you want to take things from my children. And your understanding of education, your understanding of a public square is one that says deprivation is the key to harmony. That if we just get rid of what you think are difficult or complex or scary elements that are difficult, then we'll have a better society. That you as the mom will protect us from all the things we can't handle as children. And the response for me, when it comes to Moms for Liberty and when it comes to education in particular, is we're all concerned. Is there a parent here who's not concerned about their kid? You think that I am not concerned when I look at my little 2-year-old on the playground? You think that I don't hurt when she falls and skins her knee? But guess what? I don't know about y'all, but I think about education and school as a place of discovery and a place as curiosity. A place where, as good a parent as I want to be, I can't expose and teach and cultivate everything that is part of this world. So I'm hoping that when they go to school, that they'll get a bigger world, one that I'll get to share with them. And guess what, Moms for Liberty? I'm a good enough parent to know when they need me. I don't know about you. I don't know what you're off doing. But I'm pretty fucking tuned in to what they're doing. So when they need me, when there's things they can't handle, guess who's the first one there? Me. Because I'm a parent and I care. I'm a dad. I'm a mom. When they need me, I'm the first one to cheer them on, pick them up, help them out, and talk through all that stuff in this goddamn awful world that none of us can handle. So I don't know if you're just not up for it as a parent, but don't tell me that it's my responsibility to pick up your slack. Because I want to live in a world where all of that tragedy all of that pain is limited, but it's counterbalanced when my kid leaves the house by curiosity and wonder and enchantment, by love and respect, by difference. That seems like the world we want, right? So if you want a different one, that's okay. But you don't have to take that out of mine, because I'm a parent who knows what my kid needs. And if it gets to be too much, hey, I'll be there. I don't know what you're doing. Seems like you might be too busy for that. That's fine. But some of us aren't. So don't think that you're a better parent, a better citizen, or you get to tell us what we're going to read or learn or discover. That's not how it's going to work here.
That's tough to follow. Thank you. One of the slides that you brought up was trusted sources, and that kind of like really stuck with me. Trump being the first one, family and friends being the second one.
Yeah.
As someone who, you know, may have some people in my life on that side, or, you know, having that like slippery slope into those like tendencies, what would you recommend being a good path of just like feeling things out, or just like honest conversation, or I don't know?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. Thanks so much. So I kind of take a two-pronged, at least, or maybe more, approach to these things. So I think that when it comes to the civil sphere, when it comes to elections or school boards or anything else, my hope is that we would realize the situation we're in, which is everything I've talked about today. I think it's quite a scary situation. So when we enter that sphere, the reason I called the book Preparing for War is it's not because I want to prepare for war. I have very little interest in that. I don't want to do that. But there are a lot of folks who have been preparing for war for 6 decades, right? So if we don't know that, then we're in a bad position. So when we think about local, statewide, national politics, issues, policies, everything, to me, we have to recognize that that's where we are, okay? That bipartisanship and reaching across the aisle are good when they're possible. But if someone across the aisle thinks you're a demon, or the people who vote for them think that, that's going to be really hard. If Mike Johnson is the speaker, and he thinks that homosexuality is akin to bestiality, what are you supposed to start that dialogue with in the civic sphere in terms of policy? When he thinks that abortion is a Holocaust, what are you supposed to do? Okay? Now, the question, though, is on the personal sphere. So what if I'm with my little cousin at the barbecue, or my friend who I went to high school with, and we get together 3-4 times a year, and all of a sudden when we get together, they start telling you stuff that you're kind of surprised to hear. My response is this: ask questions and let them respond. And I can tell you, as somebody who loves arguing, that's not easy for me. That if you caught me in 2009 on Facebook, whew, you know, 568 comment threads on Facebook versus, you know, Jerry from 6th grade. You know, take that, Jerry. There goes 12 hours of my life, but I think I won, okay? And over the years, I think it's this. The question is about emotion, okay? Hey, you sound really angry. Who are you angry at? Tell me about it. You sound really scared about what might be coming for us. Tell me about it. You sound really anxious. You sound like you are resentful towards these people. Tell me about it. And if you're able to be in a safe relationship with them, and not all of us are, if you have an identity that makes you unsafe with folks that we're talking about, then this is probably not possible, and I'm not saying you should stick in that, okay? But if it is possible for you to be safe, then I would say, when they tell you what they're scared of or anxious about or hopeful for, now they're telling you what they actually want in terms of feel safe, to feel like they're flourishing, like their kids have a good life, whatever. And then they might let you do the same. Whereas if you would have said, as soon as they started talking, well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong, because that source or that fact, or that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, I'm sorry. I'm dumber for hearing you say it. What they're going to now see is, oh, you're what I thought. You're what they told me you were. You're that liberal. You're that woke globalist Marxist who hates God and is trying to destroy the country. I get it. You're one of them. If you respond in a way that we've opened up a space for you to talk about then what you're scared of when it's your hope before. There's a chance that you might become a human to them. You might become their friend or their nephew or their colleague who's expressing, like them, human vulnerability. And then you might share something. You may not agree on that stuff, and what they said may be wildly off base, but if you build a sense of like, we share this. We are humans who are born into a world without a choice, and we're going to die someday without another choice. Then maybe there's a chance that you're not a demon or a God hater or a Marxist. You're just a person. And then, whether in that conversation or the next time you see right, there's these moments, right, where there's a sense of trust and vulnerability, where you can actually say, hey, I'm not going to vote for that person. Here's why. Let me just tell you, I'm scared that, or I'm fearful this. And there may be a moment, right, of reflection. There may be a moment of interiority where they're willing to kind of consider that dome of information that they're working in has some cracks and has some issues. And so I think that's, for me, what has become the go-to when it comes to those interpersonal relationships rather than the civic sphere that I talked about for most of today.
Hi. Hi. So I'm here. I'm going to be downstairs at the reception. I'm going to be representing Christians against Christian nationalism. And I'm here to tell you there's many, many Christians that are working against Christian nationalism. We view Christian nationalism as a threat to democracy and to Christianity. It's a bad type of Christianity that's being out there. So I'd be happy to talk to any of you that want to come down, and maybe you just can talk about how important that is to be working together.
Yeah, so thanks. I've interviewed Amanda Tyler on my show. Yeah, and Amanda's one of the folks who really helped to launch Christians Against Christian Nationalism. And so I'll just say that when I said at the end there that I'm not going to not lock arms with religious people who are pro-democracy, Christians Against Christian Nationalism is one of those groups. I've talked to folks who are leading that charge, and I think that we don't agree on everything, but I think we do agree that we are better when we have the separation of church and state. There's a lot of religious folks that will tell you that the only way you can have freedom of religion is through freedom from religion, right? As long as the government doesn't tell you how to be religious, you will be free to be religious how you want, or not religious how you want, and that's a shared conviction. So I think that's good.
Thank you again, and thanks for all of your thoughtful questions and wonderful responses. We are now going to convene downstairs. Again, please join if you can. Have some food and drinks, buy a book, get it signed, chat with each other, but we're very glad to have you all here today. So thanks a lot for coming.